So for step 17, we're going to be attaching the gears. So I needed to grab the differential gear, and we've got the little bevel gears, and then all of this has got to go into one side of the gearbox. So I've pulled together all the parts. We've moved into bag B. We've got the screws, the shaft, there's the bearing, and of course that's part of the full ball bearing kit that we're putting in. And then we've got the gearbox joint, a bevel gear, and all the little guys. So I'll set this up and we'll start putting this together. First, I think we'll start putting the grease into the differential. Okay, so first off, let's get the bevel gear, little bevel gears, all greased up. I'm putting them into this first because it's going to be a lot easier to grease them up if we do that. So if I put some on and just spin it around, and I'm using an older tube of the grease from a different kit, and I'll save the other one until we need it for the, because this won't have enough. Will for this part, but not necessarily for everything. It's just so much easier putting the grease on this way than trying to hold them in your hand while greasing them up. And again, we've talked about this before. I find more grease the better. There's certain things you don't have to overdo it. This seems to be fine for me. I don't mind that. So that part is done. I'll just put them aside. And then we're going to grab this, and it looks like this shaft needs to be greased, and it's going to go into that hole. So we'll grease this up. And of course, this time around, I am going to hold it. Because I think there's going to be another gear sitting on this when we move to the next step. Okay, so that's fine. I'll put that into there. So that part is in. And now it shows here you're going to grease this. I'm not. Again, we're replacing that plastic bushing with this ball bearing. So I'm going to put that in there and snap it into place. There we go. So that bearing is in there. And then it's showing that we're going to need to grease this up and this, because this is going to go in one side of it. And I think for the moment, or for the purposes of what we're doing, I'm going to grease this up first. So you can see that we're going to grease up this whole back end. And I mean, as much as I'm not going to grease up the bearing, I will grease this up. It doesn't really make a difference, because obviously there's going to be grease all over it at this point, but I'll just do that. So it's all greased. I'll grab that, stick that through all the way. So you can see now we've got something to attach everything else to. So this now has to be greased up. And we'll grease this. And it even wants the grease on this part too. So we can do that. So we've got quite a bit of grease on there now. And since that's got to sit onto here, we'll put that there. And then this, which you can see that this is going to fit that way onto that gear. We actually, I think what I might do is put that completely on. Yeah. And that way I can use this to move this around. Yeah. And we will then grease this up from here. So just grabbed another tube. Now I can really squeeze it in there, make sure I'm getting quite a bit of grease on the gear. And again, pretty much you can be pretty liberal with the grease. And then once we get the other gears in there, we'll be able to kind of move them around as well. But that is good from my perspective. So I'm happy with that. So what they're saying there is we also need this little piece to screw into the side of this gearbox, which maybe I could have done beforehand, but I'm not too worried about it. We'll screw that in. So I'll grab that piece and we'll do that next. So this piece here is this one here. And it's funny, when I was cutting it off, it kind of reminded me of the grasshopper because it's got the same sort of thing. So it's got the tapping screw, but you would undo it in order to put more oil into the gearbox. So it's going to screw down there, and then when you unscrew it, you can see the gears, so you could actually put more grease in there. So we'll just screw that in. And it's going to be a bit awkward, so I'm just going to do it off camera. We'll put that together, and then we can move on to the next step. Okay, so there is the completed step 17. So we've got the gearbox all set and in place, and on this side you can see the oil cap that I was putting together, and I've also put some cellophane tape over the cup. Now, if you go back to a 17, it actually shows you putting that tape there, and it says here, use it to ease assembly until step 22. And you can see over here for step 22, the gearbox will be nicely in the roll cage, and then we're going to be attaching these rear arm holders and everything in place. But I've never seen that before. But anyways, we're going to move on to step 18, which is the other side of the gearbox. I'll grab everything, and you can see we're going to use cellophane tape again just to hold everything together. So I'll just grab everything we need, and we'll start building step 18. Okay, so for step 18, we have the rest of the gearbox to build. Here are all of the screws, washers, bearings, etc., and parts that we need for this step, as well as this gearbox mount, which is easy to find because you just pretty much just put it on top and you know you got the right thing. And then of course we've got the other side of the gearbox and the other spur gears. So let's start greasing this and putting it together. So we know we've got the bushings that are to go there, but we're replacing them with the ball bearings, so we can actually put those in on either side. Now they might be a bit loose. Actually, they feel like they're going to be a bit loose, so they might pop out. They've already done that, so I think I'll wait on that. So what we'll do is let's grease this up. Dun-dun-dun. And this gear. And again, you might as well be pretty liberal with the grease. Just not going to go too overboard because we're going to need this grease for other parts too. And then that's going to blend into that other gear anyway. So if we see how that's going to go, we'll grab the other box. and put it on, but I can actually already see that's going to have to go there too. But let's just see what happens here. I'll put that on temporarily, and we'll get this gear here and grease this up. Dun, 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 dun. And we can see that's going to sit on there, but they say grease up that pin as well, so we'll do that. And I can tell that's going to have to come off, so we'll just slide that on there, then put that back on there, and so that part is okay. There. Now, it shows that we're going to need another MB9 bearing right there. So we'll sit that on that part there, which is interesting. Then we've got a washer. It goes over top on that other side before there's another bearing that's going to go into this side. But I think what we'll do is we'll pop that in probably here now. There we go. That's there. Now it's in. Yeah, that one's a little stiffer, but that's now in. And then we've got the other drive cup, which is going to need to be greased up. There we go. We'll put that in the, whoops, that way. And then you can see that this is all going to now be attached. So we put that little bearing, the bushing, or I should say the washer, then this should now fit together, as you can see, as long as that goes in. Yes, it does. Okay, so what we're going to have to do now is this next part. Now I'm going to put some tape over this, and then we're going to screw in this part and the bracket. So I'll just put some tape on this and we'll come back to this. Okay, so as before, it's showing that you want to put a piece of cellophane just to hold together before we screw everything in. But the one thing I just want to test is just make sure everything works. And I can tell that the gears are moving properly in there. So I think we're okay. So I will put that over. So now that's kind of, it's a kind of a weird temporary fix. But what we're going to do now is screw in these 3 screws. Well, I guess 1, 2, 3, 4 screws on either side, and that way we can hold in this gearbox. So the first one up here. And again, I'm going to go around. I'm not going to screw everything down tight first. I want to make sure that everything's going in as it should and that we're not finding any binding anywhere. And then one at the back. Okay, so those are on, and I'm just gonna tighten them up off camera, and then we'll come back and take a look at the next part of this step. Okay, so there is the completed assembly of the gearbox, and you can see the gears inside there moving around. And the other thing is, before I move on to that next bit, one of the things that I did do is just do a quick test. Hold one, spin the other one, hold that one, spin the other one, just to make sure that everything inside is working properly, because the last thing you want is to put this all together and something's not right. But everything's working fine. We've got full mobility on with the differential, and everything's moving great forward and back. So there we go, completed gearbox for the Blockhead Wild One. So now we're going to move on to this bit, and you can see that based on their diagram, it's going to go on the bottom with that notch up and attach to there. And it's showing that we've got the bigger screw coming in from that side, and then you've got the little screw coming in from that side. Now this is an interesting attachment. So it looks like the screwdriver's not going to be in the way. Just making sure that it does look correct. And you can see that part right there, which is interesting, is what this metal plate is actually resting on. So it's going to look like that. Just screw that in. And I just want to see how this little guy's going to fit in there. Whoops. Just make sure that that sits okay. Yeah, it's going in nice and easy. Continue on the other side. Yep, and there you have it. So that bracket is on, which means we are finished with step 18. So we can now move on to step 19, which is attaching the gearbox to the back end and the roll cage.